Welcome to the Trinitarian Church podcast. We are continuing our Bible series through Proverbs. I have with me Alec and Eli, and we're going to go through Proverbs chapter 9. Guys, what are some of the big picture kind of overall concepts that you see in this chapter? I love how this is set up. I feel like it's pretty straightforward in a lot of ways. Eli, what about you? What are some big picture concepts here?
How do I describe it? The graciousness of wisdom, and the turbulence of folly. It just seems like there's, elegance to wisdom, and there's a graciousness to wisdom. There's a peace about it. And then when we read about the woman of folly, we see that it seems a little turbulent. It doesn't seem as gracious. It doesn't seem as put together. It just seems like chaos is kind of what drives folly.
Yeah, agree with that. Alec, what about you?
Yeah, really, really similar. You just get a really sharp contrast here between Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly, and you get this interesting little bit in the center of the proverb where it's almost telling you to be wise in your application of wisdom, like reinforcing it a little bit that, hey, if you bring wisdom to someone who doesn't want it, you're going to end up looking foolish. And so bringing wisdom to people who want it is gonna do you better, which you may have noticed in your life is true, because there may be times when you're right and you take it to someone and you know that they don't want to hear it, and they're just going to be more upset at you for trying to correct them.
Yeah, and to me that kind of goes along with what Eli was talking about the contrast in the relationships, just how straightforward wisdom is, the graciousness, like you mentioned, Eli, and then you have that contrast with folly is not as straightforward, is not as gracious. There are tricks there, and I feel like that section you just referenced, Alex, in between, is talking about that you can see Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly in the people that you interact with. When you interact with them, you can see that these relationships, these are not just this conceptual metaphor. This is a real life thing that you're picking up with a lot of different people. Eli?
Yeah, I love how practical this is.
Yeah.
And not just in the sense of let me do this, but in the sense of how I see the world operating today. I think about it's easy to see folly in the news, right? Like we can watch the news and we can watch kind of the chaos that's unfolding around the world, which is kind of a depressing thing. But if we do give it some time and attention, man, we really can see it, how it's unfolding, and there it is. God knows, right? God wasn't blindsided by any of this. He was just like, this is how it's going to work if you choose folly, and this is how it's going to work if you choose wisdom. I love that.
Yeah, when I was younger, it's kind of a little rabbit trail, but when I was younger, I was one of those people that like new is always better. And I'm kind of sad that I wasn't growing up in this era where it's just so obvious up front that new is not always good. Like we have not got things figured out. The world is constantly trending in bad directions. And like you said, Eli, God knows better, as does Lady Wisdom. Guys, what are some verses that stick out to you here? What are the ones that just kind of resonate with you and you say, okay, there's something important here we need to take note of?
I think you get an interesting couple verses in the last section on folly, where she says, "Stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant." That you have this idea of maybe something shameful or something hidden that's going to be in the dark.
Yeah,
and you really see that for a lot of your decisions made in folly. Either you're making them in those places, or that's where you want to go after you've made those decisions, because you don't want anyone to see or find you because of what you've done. And there's, by contrast, just an openness with wisdom that, that there's a meal that you're coming to, that she's, setting the table and a bunch of people are going to be there. And you're all gonna get to have this like awesome dinner party with Lady Wisdom that's just like open and everywhere, as opposed to come here to my secret house and you're gonna do things in there that are best not spoken about.
Yeah.
Yeah. I that was the scripture I was going to talk about, Alec. It's funny you stole that right out of me. But I really
Stolen
like
scripture is sweet. Eli.
yeah, come on, Alec. Anyway, it's cool. There's a cool contrast from the one Alec just wrote to the one in Wisdom has to offer, which is, "Come eat my bread and drink of the wine that I've mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight." I love that invitation, right? It's not anything stolen. It's not anything, to be ashamed of. It's something that you've been invited to. But I also love how she says, "Leave your simple ways."
Yeah.
I think that's a calling that we have to understand, that wisdom just doesn't happen, right? It seems like there's some kind of action required to gain wisdom. And so, we know that God gives abundantly those who ask for wisdom, right? But at the same time, when you're hungry, you don't just sit there expecting a sandwich to show up right in front of you. You go up and make the sandwich, right? I think same thing for wisdom. You want some wisdom, then man, leave your simple ways and go seek it, go find it.
Yeah. To me, there's two verses that stick out because they're parallels. Verse 4, so kind of going along with Eli was talking about, "Whoever is simple, let him turn and hear." That's Lady Wisdom. Mm-hmm. And then verse 16, "Whoever is simple, let him turn and hear." That's Lady Folly. There's a couple things that strike me about that. One, who are they talking to here?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no like extra section where they're, Lady Wisdom's calling to the wise. This is her calling to everybody. And she's calling to everybody by saying, "Hey, y'all are simple. Y'all are simple people, but you can come in here and you can leave your simple ways behind." Lady Folly agrees. We are simple people. And there's a humility there of realizing that, one, we are simple people at our core, and God establishes that time and time again. Two, for simple people, Lady Wisdom and Folly can sound exactly the same. And they can sound exactly the same sometimes. And sometimes Folly sounds very wise to us. And following that, the distinction there, I love what you were talking about, Eli, is that wisdom wants us to leave our simpleness behind. Folly does not seem to have any dog in that fight. And so that's interesting to me. Go ahead.
Yeah, like it seems like Folly wants you to revel in what simpleness you have to offer, right? Like enjoy it, while wisdom is saying, "Hey, leave it."
Yeah,
I think you see an interesting like replacement in here that you're kind of pointing to, Eli. That with wisdom, that there's a letting go of something as well as an adoption of something. That it doesn't seem quite the same as just there being like a void and you're filling it, but an actual replacement that's happening. It's like you have to let folly go before you can even grab a hold of wisdom and move on. I thought that was a really interesting thing that they were highlighting. And I also have this lovely mental picture of Folly. This might just be my dark humor coming out, hard to say, but the very last verse of the proverb, when it's talking about Folly's house, but he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. I'm just picturing this like trapdoor, like right under her welcome mat. Like you hit the doorbell and like, oh no, down you go, down you go.
Yeah.
Again, morbid humor, a little Wile E. Coyote, but still.
Well, to me, that parallels with verse 10 there. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is insight." There's a lot of fear in this chapter. There's some good fear and there's some bad fear. that's happening there. There's a lack of fear, and there's fear of the Lord. And I just think that's interesting. We were talking before about emotions and how they can be good. Fear can be a good thing in the right context. And context is everything with this contrast that we see between wisdom and folly that follows throughout Proverbs. Guys, what are some application points here? If someone was reading through this and they said, okay, just tell me how I can change my life based off what's in this chapter, what advice would you give them? What would you say? Hey, here's something you can take away. You can change something today.
One thing I might say is first starting at the beginning, right? Which is that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I think that's where, if anybody has to start, and isn't sure where to start, that's where we start. And I think, just even looking at the fear of the Lord, if, anybody's ever confused about that, I know that word is more of like reverence, like have reverence and respect for the Lord, and that's where that generates, not necessarily like I'm afraid of the dark fear, right? And, monsters under your bed in a sense. But I think, we have to first have reverence for the Lord. And that means we don't just pray, when we, feel like it, or when we're in trouble, or, if we reverence the Lord, then man, we're beseeching him constantly. We're constantly trying to know him more, and we're trying. So I think that's kind of just going to lead you into a path, hopefully that takes you down towards the Lady Wisdom's house.
Yeah, Alec, what about you?
I think one of the takeaways here in trying to be a more wise person, which comes in that middle section, is to have the humility to listen to correction, which we're really bad at, both culturally, I think overall, as well as individually. And how you react to correction really does say a lot about you. If any of our listeners have listened to any of Jordan Peterson's work, one of his kind of unofficial rules for life is assume that people that you talk with know something that you don't. And there has to be a strong level of humility in that, which you see in this proverb as well. It's like, hey, if you're going to take correction from people, like, you have to be humble enough to admit that you don't have it all figured out. And that if you're the kind of person who acts like they do have it all figured out all the time, well, that says a lot about you too. If you keep down that road, you're not going to end up in a great place, as this proverb illustrates.
Yeah. Along those lines, I think my advice for somebody would be, we are simple. Acknowledge that we have blind spots, that wisdom and folly sound similar to us, that we don't understand everything about everything, and we're going to continue to progress in those ways. I think that's, Eli, I really like that point of just fleshing out, because a lot of people hear the fear of the Lord and they're like, oh, that means trembling. No, it's reverence, it's respect, it's knowing that he's up here and we're way down here. We're further down than our hands can go. And starting there, I think, is a great place, because that helps us to find as much of the way as we can. And I think that's a lot of what Proverbs is trying to do, is give us these little, like, here's something you can see in your life. Here's something that you know about that can help you to take the next step forward, because taking those steps is going to bring you life. That's going to bring you down Lady Wisdom's path. That's going to bring you into the courts of your God that you want to follow. So, well, thank you so much for everyone that's listening. We appreciate any excuse to walk through the Bible. It's a fantastic privilege that we have. We appreciate you. Blessings on y'all, and we're praying for you. Have a good one.
See ya.